Hello. Today I'm gonna be answering the question, how can language empower us to understand, question, and change the world? Um, Language is a way to communicate. It could be by speaking, which involves speaking verbally or physically, or by writing. Um, Language is something that we use every day, but we also forget its power. So we forget that language can build, encourage somebody, destroy somebody, criticize, and a bunch of stuff. Um, a famous man once said, it's a quote that I really love. He said that speak to a man in a language that he understands, that goes in his mind. But if you talk to him in his language, that goes in his heart. Now, to answer the question that I asked in the beginning, how can language empower us to understand, question, and change the world? Language empower us to understand when that language is a language that we understand. That language actually speaks to us. Um, and also, it makes us question yourself if what is being said um, makes us wonder about the way we think, the way we view things. Um, Also, it empowers us to change the world because um, when we understand what is being said, we also question ourselves. So we change our way of viewing things, how we think. That also pushes us to take action, and that's how we change the world. So for the first part, language helps us to understand. Um, Language can empower us if we actually understand what is actually being said, and it doesn't only stay in our minds, but it only speaks to us. So it speaks to our heart. There's different way of communicating. There's by speaking to a person. There is by writing. There is art. Nowadays, people use a lot of those to pass their message, to pass their opinion. But due to the difference um, between an individual, so like because of the culture, because of the country where they're from, because of the language they speak, so what the person is trying to say could take it could mean something else. So for example, um, something means so like in English it could mean something, but in French, for example, it could mean another thing. So because of the language or the culture, it's taken in different ways. Or um, a lot of countries speaks the same language. So for example, Canada speaks English, USA speaks English. But sometimes the one thing that means something in Canada, it could be something else in USA, right? So yeah. Um that is why when we're using language, we need to use every other ways to communicate. So by art, by writing, that could touch somebody. Um, if we go back to what Nelson Mandela said, he said that speak to a man in his language goes through his heart. That means our language would be the language that speaks to us, the language that um, somehow get a reaction from us. For example, one of the known people in USA that fought against racism was Martin Luther King, and he was known by his speech. One of his speech was "I have a dream." Um, the way he spoke is just captivated a lot of people's attention. The language he used, what he was talking about, the people that was listening to him, they knew, they lived those situations, so they knew what he was talking about. That's how a language speaks to somebody. And he used words, he used the exact words to touch those person. Um and that's how language empower us to understand. So by using this, by doing a speech, by using a specific word, um, it helps people understand that the situation was really bad and it needed to be changed. The second reason um, of how language empower us would be language makes us change the way we think. Um, to illustrate, for example, let's say there's a child. So that child is born in a family. That family has been going to, let's say, that family is Christian. So that family has been going to church every day, and the child goes through his childhood, teenage life, even the beginning of his adult life. That child have the same beliefs as his or her parents. But then as soon as somebody else start questioning that religion, suddenly the way that child view that religion just change, right? So we see how the way we communicate, the language we use could just change the way we view things in 1 second. Um, the way we think doesn't have to be exactly words, it could be image. So the way we view things, like for example, I could have an understanding in my head, but I can't really put it in words, so it's really an image in my head. That's why the famous quote that says an image is worth 1,000 words. Therefore, um language doesn't necessarily have to be words for it to change the way we view things. It could just be like a poster. It could just be um like a cartoon, or like a visual things that people use. Like for example, nowadays a bunch of people use cartoons to just criticize the government, for example, right? So they would show like the government is eating all of the money, they're not doing anything for the people, right? It's just show that that's those words are an interpretation. And that cartoon show really what the artist sees, what the artist is, instead of just writing like an essay of explaining, of criticizing a government, just a simple image. And that also could change the way the public that sees that cartoon, the way they view the government could be changed. It would be like, oh yeah, that's so true, the government does this and that, that's so true. um But if language gets to the point where we question ourselves, it captivates our attention, we understand, it speaks to us, that would be enough for us to take an action. Which brings us to our last argument. Language gives people confidence to do something. Having confidence is what influences people to make a change in the world. On a TED Talk by Mark, a biologist, he shared his theory about how language is what makes the connection around the world. Excuse me. Therefore, if language could give confidence, that means we could make a change around the world. If he has a connection around the world, that means we could use that to just make a change about what's bad in this world, in our world. Um, we could compare language as a car. For a car to actually move, you need to press the gas pedal, right? So language is that. Language is the one that pushes our gas pedal to take action. If we take an example from another country, let's say Nelson Mandela. Um, Everybody knows the story. He started by doing violence. That didn't work. So he realized that he need to talk to the people. So he started by doing strong speeches, um, giving arguments. Like he persuade his audience by showing them what was wrong in his society at that time. He showed them that the way they were treated, the way colored people was being treated was not right. He wanted to show that colored people are also human, and by his speech, he actually convinced all of the black um, nation or the colored people that they needed to change this thing, right? And even though that cost them a lot, some of them lost their lives, and and or they lost a family, a close friend, they actually took action. They actually let language speak to them, touch them, make them question of how can I change this? How can I change that? How can I change that? And that's how um, today in South Africa, there's still racism, but there's less, right? And if I've succeeded by using language, maybe a little bit of violence, but they still use language, right? So, in conclusion, to answer the question in general, um, language empower us to understand by using a language that speaks to us. So it speaks to us. It doesn't stay in our minds, but it stays in our heart. So there's something in our heart, something that language uses that just triggers something from us. It empowers us to understand by I'm sorry to question by making us change the way we think, the way we view things. Um, it also empower us to change the world. So if we convince that this or that is wrong, language did that. It convinced us that this is wrong in the world. It makes us understand the reason why. So language gives us the confidence. It gives us like a boost to take action. And we talked about how a bunch of people have succeeded. Like Nelson Mandela, he succeeded by doing strong speeches. He even have famous quote that people still use till till this day, to give them confidence. There's Martin Luther King. His famous speech "I Have a Dream" is really known everywhere, even though it wasn't say in their mother's tongue, or but they still understood what he was trying to say. Um, the last question I want to ask, we talked about how language does many stuff for us. Um, does that mean the same way language empowered us? Does that also mean that it could also disempower us too? So discourage us, don't give us hope too? Well, thank you.